views, we think, well, what they've sort of, to a certain extent, ignored is the global implications of this motion. That's what we're going to extend towards today, how this is actually going to result in a better sort of solidarity of shared humanity, and it's going to have lots of net positive effects across the planet as well. Two broad points were brought before that. Firstly, the point about commercialization of humans that we got from open competition, we say good. We want to create a free market for talent. We want countries engaging in the race to the top. How is this going to happen? Like, we see like lots of countries benefit extensively from overseas people coming to it. We see like in the UK, like overseas students have a massive economic input relative to the number of people. We see countries like the US, due to the good opportunities available there, they're able to have an exclusive visa process and therefore improve the quality of the immigrants that they attract into the country. Like now, on our side of the house, due to the free movement you get, the global free movement, all countries have a vast pool of talented people across the planet to attract. What this is going to result in, inevitably, is a race to the top, and this clashes directly with the point about like stopping paying for education that we got from the second speaker of the opposition. Because now each and every country is going to want to get the best and the brightest, and historically countries have profited from this. For instance, America has profited from German scientists, Hong Kong has profited from like foreign talent, every single country has profited from having like educated people like emigrate, right? It's going to create an incentive for the government to create a better society in order to attract these immigrants. It's almost like creating favorable conditions for FDI, like infrastructure, except in this case you're not creating for FDI, but rather for people. You're improving the education, you're improving the healthcare, you're making society, or you're putting in efforts to make society more tolerant, and you're making the labour market more flexible as well. And all of those have net positive externalities for everyone, including the local population. I think that's a burden that opposition haven't dealt with. Second point, we heard that lots of middle-class people are going to get kicked out of the job market. We think, no, what this is actually going to result in is more supply-side economic growth, because we're going to witness an expansion of a skilled workforce in each country with sort of like more immigration of skilled people, right? It's going to, what's this going to result in? With a greater pool of skilled people to choose from. Companies are going to have to compete for these people, right? Increasing the wages and the salaries. This is, again, a net positive outcome that opposition haven't dealt with. Now, moving on to my 3 points of substantive. Firstly, I'm just to provide a brief philosophical justification for this. Because, okay, let's just take a step back and say, given the state of the world, no one has a choice on where they're going to be born. No one knows before they're born, where they're going to be born, right? Birth is essentially a lottery. We have an equal, anyone has an equal chance to be born in the UK or Kenya, assuming it's got, the same population. From the point of view of someone not yet born, they want the world to be as equal as possible and as much opportunity as possible to move around, so that, in order to ensure maximum overall social good. This house, as the world, can only really see the world through the eyes of that unborn child, in whose interest it is for the world to be as free, as open, and as equal as possible. Secondly, my second point today is going to be about national identity, and my third point is going to be about how global problems require global solutions. That only comes on our side of the house. National identity. Well, what is really the basis of national identity? It's either some sort of a delusion of the superiority of one nation over another, which people are indoctrinated, or, more frequently, it's just the mere fact of otherizing others, right? The fact that you belong in a group that you don't have a choice of being born into, the fact that we are us because we are not others, therefore we are us and we're together. That is, fundamentally, flawed, and I'm going to come to that later, but we think that there's several effects of this. We see even harmless effects, obviously, you support sports teams only because you're born into the same country, even though you have absolutely no choice, no one deserves to get your support on the basis of that alone. We see, effects in patriotism, you sign up for the army without exactly knowing why, because you're told it's your hierarchy to conform to this idea of trying to, go on the basis of an identity that you have no choice in choosing. And you're indoctrinated with this philosophy of, your country above all else, even if the rest of the world is harmed by this, even if it's detrimental to other countries. This leads to the rise of nationalism and all sorts of nationalistic effects. What our motion does to combat that is it introduces a long-term root and branch transformation of the premise of national identity. Because under our side of the house, the separation between countries, the borders are eradicated. There are no longer borders, and that's very important, because the concept of citizenship is also weakened as well. So now, as opposed to the status quo, under our side of the house, house, being born is more of a temporary, transient state, and that's absolutely essential. Like, because as soon as you're born, oh thank you, you know that when you're 18, the world is at your feet. You can move anywhere. So your people are no longer just the people who live within the borders of what used to be your country, but rather the people who live in the entire world. Like, events in other parts of the planet are no longer something that you can just say are inside closed-off borders, because there are no longer those borders. Like, those events, they're rather in a place that you can have very easily move to, that you have the opportunity to move to, or like more likely where, like for instance, your sibling or your best friend has already moved to, like having utilized free movement. So you can no longer just otherize others just based solely on the fact that you were born there. Third main point to substantive. Before that, I'll take both.
Okay, so the main problem are those migrants who are less beneficial and who are less educated and who are getting attacked by racism the most. And what you are doing and what you're imposing is exactly limiting those people's options and limiting those people's options to break through.
Like, those people are, like, you already have to demonstrate that you're going to be net payer into the tax system, right? And those people are also going to have opportunities to benefit from the increase or, like, the betterment of society that each country is going to have the incentive to undertake. So now moving on to the crux, the third main point, why global problems require global solutions. What are these global problems? We see, for instance, climate change or nuclear warfare. These are problems that affect every country essentially equally. Like, we see, however, that countries undertake national approaches to these international problems. Like, China prioritizes its own national economic growth as opposed to prioritizing fighting global climate change. We see in the WTO export restrictions for national purposes as opposed to like international solutions. We see like nuclear weapons in countries like North Korea, but also in countries like the US. Like, the mere presence of those, based on the basis of like a national solution, national identity. Under our side of the house, like, due to the more exposure you get to foreigners, you get less petty tribalism, because suddenly they're your friends, they're your neighbours, you've gone to the same schools with people from all over the world because they've moved to your country. You've got more linguistic convergence due to the free movement. Like, your borders are no longer just your country, right? They've expanded to essentially the stratosphere because the entire world's in it. Like, you get a more global outlook. Like, you get a shared sense of humanity, solidarity, a shared sense of identity. You recognise that you live in one planet, you've got the exact same resonance. So the effect of this is that in the prisoner's dilemma, you would cooperate instead of being selfish. You no longer want to nuke someone else in another country because, like, your best friend's relatives live there, and rising oceans in Maldives, they affect your colleagues who are already living there as well. So you can no longer ignore them due to the sense of, like, over